Have you ever felt like you didn't want to come out of bed? You felt like so demotivated and you didn't really want to do anything, even the fun things? Well, a depressive feeling is something that we can all experience at some time or another. Some feel it a little more, some feel a little less. If you are feeling it more strongly, highly encouraged to contact a professional, a therapist to help you. But otherwise, this episode, we're going to share some strategies on how to cope and manage and learn about a depressive feeling. But also, very interestingly, I never had that until I started perimenopause, and just the hormone changes gave me that feeling. And I was not aware that that could actually happen. So it was a really weird feeling for me, first time. And it was very interesting to learn more about it. So in this episode, we're going to talk about and share more about how hormones can impact it or other things can impact it. Again, if you're really struggling with clinical depression, please reach out to a therapist, a professional, to get the appropriate help. This is purely for informational purposes only. Welcome. I'm Heike Fallon. I'm a certified personal performance coach, and I help my clients master their self-leadership to lead others very well. And emotions and how we feel play a huge role, not just on how we are with others and how we're leading, but also how we're feeling, how healthy we're feeling. Pain plays a role. So it is important to talk about emotions, and I think this is a great way to give a small introduction into this topic.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, I'm Shannon Passalacqua, and I'm a life coach as well, and I help women heal after miscarriages. And I'm not a therapist yet, but I'm
But
on my way.
which is so
So,
awesome. So we do have some background knowledge, just because I do use a brain-based approach, and I've been dealing a lot with clients that felt definitely also depressed because of pain, that chronic pain that they had, that kind of over time kind of created the feeling of depression. So let's first cover a few things. Uh, what can cause or trigger depression? I think that's, and we may not have the full list here, but I had no idea really that hormone changes can do that to you.
yeah.
You actually feel it.
So
And
there is,
for a second, for me, hormone replacement therapy did the trick, and I've not had that feeling again. But that was my case. But like you have a lot of clients that went through miscarriages, and I know yourself as well, and that can, that kind of traumatic event can absolutely trigger.
yeah, there's a lot of different things that can trigger depression. And we want to be careful when we're throwing the word depression around because it's defined differently for different types of depression. So
Mhm.
there are moods of, not feeling great, and that is, there's different types of depression. So if you feel like you are depressed, talk to a therapist, talk to your doctor, because there are different requirements that you need to meet. There are different things that will spark or could start a depressive episode or long-term depression. But I want to touch on the hormone one really quickly because I did have that when my hormones were messed up when I was going through I am going through perimenopause. It felt like depression even though I knew I wasn't depressed
Yep, same here.
because when my hormones were fine and kind of depended on where I was in my cycle, uh, I felt fine. And so there is PMDD, and that can happen to anyone who has a cycle. Um, and it happens the week before your period and can go into a couple days of your period, and it's because your hormones are down. Um, and it feels like depression. It is actually qualified as depression, and you should talk to a therapist or your doctor about it because they can help you with it. And there are treatments. I don't know really how how great the treatments are, but it's lethargy, so feeling really exhausted. Sorry, lethargic. I can't think of all of them right now, but
Change in appetite. So
change in appetite, which happens to me, like I get super, super, super hungry, and it's just absolutely crazy.
yeah, it can be
Change
increasing or decreasing.
or
It's very
decrease.
interesting. So it could be you don't want to eat at all, or you all of
Yeah.
a sudden want to eat.
Yeah. Like I wake up in the middle of the night hungry. It's wild. There is change of sleep. There's just change of thoughts. Um, your body hurts,
Yep.
pain in your body. So and this can increase if you have PCOS, if you have endometriosis, which I have endometriosis. But hormones have a huge impact on how we feel. Same as hypothyroidism, which I'm going to get tested for as well, because you can present with depression if your thyroid isn't functioning correctly, and it feels like depression.
Yep.
So if you feel suddenly like something isn't right, you can't get out of bed, you're exhausted, your hair's falling out, you're not able to sleep, or you're sleeping too much, or you're eating more, like itchy skin, it could be perimenopause, it could be hypothyroidism, it could be PMDD, it could be depression. So it's really important to talk to your doctor about all of this and have everything looked at.
But it's a fine line, right? Where does
It is. They're all correlated.
where is it just a mood, or when is it depression? Is it temporary depression? But obviously.
So there is obviously, like we were talking about with miscarriages, there is depression in the DSM. It's called grief. So, and it depends on how long that grief lasts, whether it then is considered depression. So there are things that will spark a depressive episode. There are things that occur in your life that will spark grief. It has to be an abnormal reaction for it to be considered depression.
We're kind of mingled right now, like causes or triggers and the symptoms. But the key is, let's go back to the symptoms right now. The symptoms can be all the same. So I knew I wasn't like actually long-term depressed when I woke up and didn't want to get up that day.
Right.
I felt like totally unmotivated for a couple of days. The key is it still is similar symptoms. And again, it can be falling. It's not a clear line when depression starts and end necessarily. Obviously, for longer term, yes, but in those shorter episodes. But physical, it is definitely the fatigue, the low energy, the change in eating habits, the change in sleep habits, or the pain that comes out of kind of nowhere. It can also be actually stomach, gastrointestinal issues can show up. From a behavioral standpoint, it can be how we act, right? Like not wanting to participate. I definitely had that too. I just didn't want to do the thing.
Right. It's not wanting to participate with your friends. It's lack of desire to, it's if it's affecting your work, if it's affecting your relationship, it's affecting your friends.
Yep.
So there's, and I had that, and one of my friends was like, do you have depression? I'm like, I don't have depression. It's like I just feel like crap.
Yep.
And once I got on hormones, everything changed. So I think it's really important for people to know that it happens and it's okay, and to try to find out what it is that's either causing it, or, sometimes depression can just happen.
Yeah. So definitely cognitive right here. I had some issues there too, since I had definitely brain fog. I definitely felt like I couldn't concentrate and memorize things as well until things were kind of balanced a little better with the hormones. Definitely negative thoughts. I mean, most people know that, negative thoughts, the big difference
suicidal thoughts.
Suicidal thoughts. That's really when it clearly is depression, right? Because it's that fine line where it sits. So with the hormone changes, to my knowledge, unless it's not taken care of for long term, then that could happen. But usually if you do take care of things, that usually doesn't manifest itself being as strong. And then emotionally, there definitely a certain amount of sadness. I've had clients too that just started crying. Just also maybe a little more irritability, like being a little more impatient, is another symptoms. And again, they can be, it's not a clear cut, like all these symptoms, everybody can have them. It could be from hormone change. It can be from traumatic events. It can be also from other things that happen, just continuously small things. Like, if I'm not, the lack of support or lack of community, just over long periods of time, it can kind of create itself.
It actually, the science shows that people who have a more supportive environment and come from a more supportive community have lower rates of depression.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
So, I mean, and again, I'm going to, put the caveat in, that's not always true, because it can be, passed down, depression can be passed down and it is hereditary.
Yep.
So it's not always true. So there are different ways that it can show up or different reasons why it can show up. But usually if you have a more supportive, if you have a supportive home system.
Yeah. So yes, it can be also genetic, like you said, or it can also, there's been, it's kind of interesting because I read different things so far. There's always been the thought of there's an imbalance of neurotransmitters, meaning the chemicals, right? So since we have cortisol, known as a stress hormone or chemical, but it's actually needed too, just not too much. And people usually with depression are on a higher stress level and there's more cortisol, and they may have a lower level of serotonin and other chemicals that are usually the feel-good ones. And so there's also been the thought of that being a cause. But then also I last year read some research and information about how much more really the gut plays a role.
Yeah.
And the microbiome. So yes, the food we eat and the diet we have matters. And it's been also
and exercise.
And exercise. Yeah, we're going to get to a couple of those strategies in a second, but food matters because the microbiome, your gut matters and can have an impact on your mental well-being and your mental health. And that can be depression, anxiety. It all kind of falls in that. And where very interesting with that also was the fact of really going on the smallest level, the mitochondria, which I found very fascinating, which is all kind of more newer research out there that the mitochondria are the smallest kind of cells, and they're everywhere. And however well your health is, or how healthy the mitochondria, which can be impacted by sleep, by diet, by hormones, by community, all those things. And that the health of the mitochondria actually are the more root cause to be determined, since more research needs to be done. But I thought it was kind of fascinating, because it's not just in your head or
and that's what I keep talking to with like my professor and a couple of my friends who are therapists. It has, I think moving forward, it needs to be a whole body, because it can be in your head. I was having this conversation with my professor last night. I was like, well, sometimes meds can help you access everything that you need to, right? Like if you're depressed and you don't want to leave the house, or if you don't want to work out, the meds can help you get to the point where you do want to work out, you do want to leave the house. And so I think there is an argument for meds. I think there's also an argument for, he was talking about behavior change. And I think this is also very important because you can rewire your brain. And people who have faulty thinking, not because of they did something wrong, it's not like to shame them, it's not but when you have faulty ways of looking at something, and that's just how it's always been, it can cause depression. And so when you reteach yourself how to think about something and how to react in a situation, that can change the depression.
Absolutely. And sometimes, again, even though the strategies we usually share don't include medication can be a really key factor to get you going. Because somebody who really is depressed, you can tell them to go exercise, but if you're not getting out of bed and you can't get out of bed, then there's nothing you can do. Sometimes it is needed. So it's on an individual basis, it's definitely recommended to do see a therapist and to get support, because it's nobody's fault to be depressed.
No. And there are types of depression that don't respond to meds. But what I found interesting was that people who do take an SSRI, it changes, your brain chemistry. When you stop taking the SSRI, it does continue to change your brain chemistry, and it still has a positive effect. And I thought that was fascinating. I'm not saying everyone go take meds. I'm just saying I thought that was interesting. There's an argument for all of it.
Right? Yeah, and I know I've seen research studies where combining actually taking medication with exercise had the more profound results. And then when people then started tempering off from the medication but continued the exercising, that was what got them, really on a good path for the long term. So,
so then maybe we should talk about steps.
Yes. So, I mean, we already said nutrition matters. So, and there has been so much out there
New research.
New research, but also a fact is that there's so much stuff in our food that even when you think you're healthy eating, you may
Mhm.
not because of all the additives and stuff. And there's talk definitely of how all these additives and preservatives actually have an impact on the microbiome in the gut. And that can also make us more sensitive. And
Mhm.
so it's very important to pay attention to, um, you know,
Well, it also causes inflammation,
yeah, so exactly. So lower inflammation,
and
is
inflammation is going to raise your hypothyroidism if you have it. It's going to raise your PMDD levels if you try working on a low inflammation, low inflammatory diet.
yeah, so I'm not gonna give like, like usually not like detailed. Again, that's something what I believe too. If you're struggling with food or you know you need to adjust food, highly recommend to work with a nutritionist actually to really
Mhm.
fine tune it. And particularly if you have to heal your gut, that's what I did. I had to really heal my gut, in order to also eat really the things again, or being able to eat the things that are good for me. But generally speaking, a low inflammatory diet, which usually means not having preservatives, not having so much sugar.
Less dairy,
Yeah, but definitely processed foods are not great to consume.
gluten.
But again, just think of like if you Google low inflammatory or anti-inflammatory diet, usually can get people well started. Let's say it that way. Sleep, big one. I think sleep
Sleep is
is
huge.
it's since I had to deal with sleep issues and took a while to fix all that. It is a challenging thing because you're not sleeping and then you're not feeling good and all this stuff is there, but then because of that, you're not sleeping. So it's kind of the
Yeah,
cycle that you get in.
it's a
It,
terrible cycle.
it's a terrible cycle, but ideally we want to sleep 7 to 9 hours on average. And there are so many strategies that can be done, and it may take really some time and individualizing
And
and
we've talked about that in past episodes about how to really work on your sleep.
yeah, so but it's that could be for somebody just working on that can sometimes make a huge difference in shifting their mental health just by getting more sleep. Stress management for sure, that can be obviously it's very individual depending on what things stress you, what are the triggers, and managing the those as well as your energy that oftentimes required to really dig deeper. And that's where coaches come in, like you and me,
Mhm.
helping our clients to work on their stress management, work on their daily schedule, their routines, their
Their
habits,
behaviors.
their behavior that serve them. We already said it. Community, social connections are huge, and
And
especially
it's the last thing you want to do when you don't feel
it's the
good.
last thing you want to do. I know,
You
but
do not want to be in community. You do not want to reach out to anyone. So I would say have a community before shit hits the fan.
work on it now beforehand. But if you don't, then just the one person. Just start little, it's okay. Start small. And even if I always say too, if you don't want to see somebody, how about just a phone call or even texting? It doesn't have to be hanging out and
I
going to,
actually provide that with my clients is one of the first things that we do because I know they don't want to really talk to someone they don't know
yeah,
or show up on a Zoom call that they don't know. I just provide texting
yeah.
and can
So
help
start
them for the
small.
first couple weeks during that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's okay to start small wherever you're at. And especially, I think that's the thing is that, yeah, instead of going, oh, I can't do that, I don't want to do this, start little. Even if exercising is not on the radar, start small, do 5 squats,
Mhm.
do something very small. Now, one big thing that I do with my clients are vision exercises and exercises for the vestibular system, so the inner ear, as well as the vagus nerve, activating the vagus nerve, which helps calm the nervous system down. All those exercises can have a profound impact on depression as well as anxiety, especially the eye exercise and the vestibular exercise. So that's what I do
Mhm.
with my clients as well. And then therapy, 100%. If
Yeah, talk therapy is helpful, and different therapists have different strategies that they can use and different ways that they work with depression. If you can't access a therapist at this point, um, that which I would first of all I would say to look into it because there are a lot of good providers online that if you can't leave the house or it's they have they there are good resources online. Um, Journaling.
Yeah.
and try to reconnect with your values and what's important to you. So maybe journal about what's important to you and what's going to help you through this time.
Yeah, and meditation as well, if that works for you. It can be sometimes if you haven't done that before, it can be maybe hard to start. But here's a key thing, I think. Try different things, even if some may have not worked in the past, they may work now. Start smaller. Even with the therapies, there's so many different kinds out. Different
Mhm.
therapists have different strategies or differently certified. And even if one therapist didn't work, maybe another one works.
You can leave the therapist. This is not a marriage. If it doesn't work out, it's fine. Find a therapist that you connect with.
Yeah,
Not
so that's
everything is, you're not always going to connect with the first therapist that you meet. Find someone you connect with.
I know. So that's like I think that's when sometimes people also get discouraged. Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
go,
Cause you
"Oh,
just took time out of your
I've
day.
tried that and it didn't work."
Yeah.
Well, it's not always the same. So to go out again, and I know it's hard to bring up the energy to try again, but it's helpful. One interesting thing too is light therapy can have a tremendous impact.
Hmm.
So like meaning also just getting sunlight, literally just going outside in the morning, just getting a little sunlight, just sitting in the sun, or even if it's overcast, but the light therapy can actually help. So I also have used with some of my clients that live more in areas where it's longer dark, further
Yeah.
north. There are actually devices too that you
Hmm.
can, they're small devices, you plug them in or recharge them, and they emit light and particularly wavelengths that can help with mood.
Now
So
you're not talking about just regular light
n-
coming from our light bulbs,
no,
right? We're
no,
not
it's
just going to go stare at a.
no, don't stare like that at that. The key is that
That's not it.
it's a specific wavelength of light that the device emits, and that can be. And all you need to do is the one I have is you just put it up on. You could be sitting somewhere and you just put it up next to you. If you're reading or something, you can have it up just so it comes to you. But again, also just if you don't want to buy a device, just sunlight. Even if you don't want to do anything, just get yourself into sunlight. Can have a
Coffee and
tremendous.
go outside.
So
So, yeah.
yeah, so there's
But I think it's good to wrap up with there are many different reasons why this could be happening through no fault of your own. This is it's
and
not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to be hidden. I was actually very surprised when it hit me, um, and to realize that it was due to my hormones. And I think it needs to be talked about a lot more.
Absolutely. And I want to, one last thought at the end. I do want to, when, if somebody's listening and they are not having those feelings, but they may know somebody and they have maybe in the past always go, like, I don't get it. Isn't this person just getting up and let's go? It is definitely a state where it's not
You
like the
can't.
people don't want to.
Yeah,
They
you can't.
want
You
to get
can't.
up. They want to participate. They want to get up, but they physically can't. And it has nothing to do with willpower
Yeah,
and
or just thoughts over.
pretend. So if you know anyone that may be struggling, please understand it's not that they don't want to.
No one
Often
wants to feel like that.
nobody wants to feel like that. They literally, it's a chemical changes that are there presented. There's other like I said, internal things that we mentioned before, parts in the brain that may be overly active, underly active, thyroids, you name it, different things are happening. They physically cannot get up. It's like you would tell somebody with a knee injury, oh, just get up and walk. You wouldn't do that.
Go run a marathon.
Go run a marathon. You wouldn't do that. So it's the same thing. And I think that is something that it's hard to sometimes empathize with the people that may be struggling and with their mood and they want to.
Mhm.
Please have a little more compassion and understand it's not their choice, and ask them rather, how can I help you? And
Right.
what may work, rather than, or again, sending a text rather than going like, oh, just pull it together.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, with that said, I hope this was informative. Until next
Yeah.
time.
Bye.
Bye.